Hi, my name's Dave. Today I'm going to show you how I run my Alembic pot still. What I'm doing here is getting ready to transfer my fermented mash into my 10-gallon pot. What I have is an insulated pot that has a Canadian rye, a malted rye. This is a 100% grain, all grain recipe, single malt, so to speak. It is a single malt that, to be honest, is just a challenge. Rye is just a gummy mess, and you'll see. But this is just my version of running a pot still. This is kind of where I start. I'm in the middle of a stripping run here, a series, what I call a cycle. So after I set my pot up, then you'll see I will also, once I start to get a distillation going, I'll start another mash and just repeat the cycle. So here you see I've got my pot full. I'm just kind of dry fitting everything. I've got my hoses hooked up to my worm tub there to cool it off. I'm just heating it up. Once it comes up a little bit of temperature, I will put it all together. And at the same time, the way that I run my still with that burner, it's a double burner, so I will put my pot and I will mash in another grain bill while I'm distilling here. Here you see I have an RV water filter that I hook to my hose, and I can fill my 15-gallon pot. I'll put about 10 gallons in it, depending on the recipe you use. You know, you want to follow that recipe, but for this recipe I'm using 27 pounds of malted rye crushed and 10 gallons of water. My pot there is a 15-gallon pot with a shotgun filter in it, and with most mash bills that I use, I can drain pretty easily right into my fermenting pot. So this is really a 3-pot system that I have. Rye is different though, and you'll see how I have to deal with it. It's very labor intensive, but I'm too far in now to throw what I've learned away. And every iteration I've changed my recipe just a little bit. So by the time I do this 4 or 5 times and I've gotten a carboy full of stripping run, I've pretty well got a recipe dialed in, and then I'll just do that recipe again if I want to you know, repeat what I've done or change something. Rye is a smaller grain. I had to adjust the rollers on my roller mill there from 1 millimeter for a Scotch malted barley down to 0.64 millimeter for this rye to get the grind that I was looking for. Just trying to crack it open. I don't want flour. This is a good grind, and this stuff really smells fantastic. Here I'm going to add some rice hulls as well. One of the problems with rye is the proteins and the beta glucans that are in it. They tend to turn kind of sticky and gooey, and they really are just hard to deal with. There are some enzymes that can be used, and you'll see me add those later. And the rice hulls help as well. The problem is that it doesn't drain well. and you'll see how I have to deal with that as well. Here I'm just checking the still. It is a thick mash, so I'm running it very slowly. It's much slower than I would normally do. Just because I don't want to burn the bottom, I don't want to scorch it, and I've got plenty of time here, so you know I'm not in a big hurry. I can just enjoy the evening and mash and distill. So I've come up to my strike water temperature, mashed everything in. My rice hulls. The last recipe I did, I added the rice hulls first. I don't know if that makes a difference. We'll see. Now these are digestive enzymes. You can find these at any healthcare store, Walgreens, Rite Aid, Amazon. The reason I'm using these is still behind the bench has done some studies, and one of the things he found was that the beta-glucan in the rye is deactivated by the beta-glucanase that is in the digestive enzyme. So this version I'm adding 8 capsules, and each capsule has 65 hold on, I gotta get my steampunker out. 65 BGUs. So 65 units, and I'm using 8 pills. So I don't think that's enough at the end. I think I needed more. I'm going to mash that in very well, and I've maintained my temperature that I wanted to. I didn't have to turn the heat on, or sometimes I will wrap my pot just to hold the temperature I'm looking for the length of time that I need you know, the liquid to be in contact with my grain. So here's my pot, and you notice this is the same pot I just emptied into my pot still, and it's been about an hour and a half of my rye being stirred and at temperature, but you can see it's just not coming out. It's just a thick blob. So what I've done to fix this, to remedy this, is I have a strainer and a ladle, and I take a ladle out, or a strainer full out, and I ladle it through the strainer, and I just press all the liquid out. And it's effective, but labor intensive. You can see here I'm collecting for my spirit run there. That's going well. It's just a mess. In the end, you know, I wind up with an empty pot and a nice little batch there to ferment. And that goes to the compost. So I've tasted everything along the way. I think you have to, just so you know what's going on, what flavors you're developing. Checking my specific gravity. That was roughly 1080. Now I'm going to check the pH of my mash, and I'm about a half a big jar into my distillation, so I'm going to check the alcohol content coming out. My last mash was a little, it needed some citric acid, so I threw 2 tablespoons in. This one did as well, so I threw 2 more tablespoons into this. I want to show you what my mash looks like here after it's all done and ready to go. I'll throw some daddy's yeast in here as soon as it cools off a little bit, but it's really thick. I typically don't run my still this slow. I would be done by now, but I'm really afraid I'll scorch the bottom and burn my mash, so I'd rather take my time, and I'm not in a big hurry. I mean, what else am I going to do besides go to bed? And here I'm checking my ABV, and it's about, I'm down to about 40%. So at this point, I'll just turn it off when I get tired. As I said earlier, I've only been doing this for about a year or so. And if you look down on my right, I've got a little notepad there where I've started taking my notes. And as I develop my recipes, I can just write things down as I go. This is the recipe that I'm working on now. It's a century rye malt. This is my first recipe, and this was the first stripping run that I developed. And I'll just kind of go down, and as I do it, I'll just check it off. I'll show you another one here where I've finished and double distilled already. This is a crisp, heavily peated 50 ppm second recipe, fourth stripping run. And you can see down on the right there, after you do this for a while, you can start putting numbers together and trending your specific gravities and final gravities. And it just helps to kind of keep you on track and develop things. So you'll be able to get a feel for how things taste and what they should smell like. And these numbers will help you correlate all that. And you'll understand over time kind of where you're at in your process. You won't need to do this. These old timers don't write anything down anymore. But when you're new, it does help. So there's that. There's a lot of people that have helped me to learn how to do this. I'm going to leave a link down below to all of their sites. There's some really talented people in this hobby, and there's a lot of good information out there. So thank you guys.